Hello everyone, welcome to the section of continuing our series of lectures based on diseases of kidney or the excretory system. We today have a most discussed and frequently encountered disease as renal calculi. Renal calculi stands out to be very important from the homeopathic point of view because many a times we encounter people coming to us and saying that homeopathy does gives a solution to renal calculi. But before administrating any medicine from homeopathic point of view, first of all we need to understand what is renal calculi, what are its location, how do we diagnose that we do have a renal calculi, and also we need to understand what are the management techniques and also how to manage or how to take care of the patient suffering from renal calculi. So how do we define renal calculi? Renal calculi is the kidney stone, also known as renal calculi. Latin source is renis, that is kidney, and calculi, which means pebble. These are solid concentrations or crystal aggregation formed in kidney from dietary minerals. So obviously the source of formation obviously comes from somewhere out of the body, that is the dietary where we are eating. Some of those minerals gets deposited in the kidney and that leads to kidney stone or the renal calculi. Also, the other definition of renal calculi, it is a condition in which there is a formation of stone within the renal system, that is not only in the kidney but it can be anywhere in the urethra or the bladder. So it's a formation of calculi in the complete excretory system or comprising of your kidney, urethra, bladder, can be located anywhere of these three locations. Kidney stones are a significant source of morbidity with an annual incidence of around 1 to 2 per 1000. So the frequency is quite high. What we see, 1 or 2 patients per 1000 of the population, and a incidence of around 3 to 5%. So these many percentage of people will have a lifetime incidence, recurrence. We can see that repeatedly these people are suffering from 80% of those with kidney are men. So again the incidence ratio for according to the gender stands out to be more in the males as compared to female. It's no doubt that females would also suffer, but it is the male who suffers more. That is either due to metabolic defects such as cystinuria or infection. So recurrency of infections in male either is more. So that is one of the reasons that males have more incidence as compared to female. Now we come to the recurrence rate are estimated to be over 50% over a 10 period of time. So suppose if we have a lot of patients like a person suffering from renal calculi, the chances of getting again affected with renal calculi, suppose once we have removed the calculi and again if that person can develop, yes, there are 50% possibility that in the coming 10 years that person would again suffer from renal calculi. So whenever we are starting the treatment, we should be in a position to tell the patient that there are chances of recurrence. So from the management point of view or the suggestive advice from point of view, you need to tell the patient that if you will not take precautions to avoid the formation of renal calculi, there are 50% chances that you might develop. And over a longer period of time, that is around 20 years, the chances of development stands to be around 75%. The incidence of urolithiasis increases to 20 to 25%. So, what we have seen that the affection per 1000 was around 1 to 2 patients per 1000. But the chances will increase in hot and temperate climate. So now we are in Rajasthan, it's in hot climate. The chances of getting renal calculi increases around 20 to 25%. in hot and temperate climates. So we should keep this in our mind. That partly due to these risk of dehydration. So somewhere it is understood that dehydration is one of the pathogenetic part of development of renal calculi. So development of dehydration would obviously contribute into formation of renal calculi. Now incidences, men are most commonly experience the first episode between 30 to 40 years of age, while for women the age of first presentation is somewhat later. So although it's not in strict rule that a person less than 30 years won't get affected with renal calculi, but yes, the majority, the age or incidence is 30 to 40 years in males, whereas females do get affected at a bit later age, that is between 40 to 50 or further. Now let us look into the risk assessment, or what are the factors which are responsible, or what are the risk factors due to which renal calculi might develop. So it depends on the occupation. If the person do have where there is a lot of loss of sweat, a lot of perspiration, and the possibilities of dehydration increases, that can factor. Also family history, cystinuria, which is an inherited metabolic disorder. So family history is also important. Dietary pattern of family diet, high in calcium, milk, in oxalates and alkali, might also contribute. While investigating a patient for renal calculi, we would be all interested in knowing the symptoms or what is the size of the calculi. But before that, we also need to inquire into the dietary habit of the patient, because these dietary habits actually contributed in the formation of renal calculi. And these dietary substances, like I have enumerated here, that is calcium, vitamin D, milk, protein, oxalate and alkalis, need to be cut down in the diet so that further development of renal calculi might not occur. As we have discussed earlier, I told that there are 50% chances in the first 10 years and 75% chances in the coming 20 years. So for that, you need to advise the patient that he need to be hydrated all the time. Secondly, also these substances need to be cut down. I am not telling to stop them, because some of them are very essential for normal growth and functioning of the body, but we need to cut down them. Also avoid dehydration. There might be some small bowel diseases like Crohn's disease, and medical conditions like hypercalciuria and hyperparathyroidism and gout may also develop into lead into development of renal calculi. So these are the secondary causes or the secondary manifestation of these diseases, like hypercalcemia and hyperparathyroidism and gout. These are the primary disease, and due to which the secondary complication of renal calculi might develop. Now, what are the risk factors of renal calculi? Like recurrent urinary tract infection, urinary status, immobility, urinary tract obstruction and hypercalcemia also contribute in the formation of renal calculi. Now, before we start up with the clinical manifestation, or how do we understand renal calculi, we need to look into the classification of renal calculi, because classifying renal calculi gives you an idea, first of all, what is the location of the renal calculi, where exactly it is lodged, and if you know the lodging site, we will understand that what types of symptom it is producing. Also, we need to understand, it's not that the renal calculi is composed of a single type of substance. It might have a variable composition. One person is suffering from oxalate type of renal calculi. The other might be suffering from uric acid type of renal calculi. The other might be suffering from pyruvate type of renal calculi. So we have a different composition. So based the classification of renal calculi here is actually based on either on its location or its chemical composition. So based on the location, we have following 5 categories. The first is urolithiasis, second is nephrolithiasis, third is calyceal, fourth is erythrolithiasis, and fifth is cystolithiasis. So these five stands out to be the classification of renal calculi. These all are renal calculi. The name, the difference in the name is actually due to the difference in their location where they have developed. So the location of renal calculi is very important so that we can term them. So in the case, if you are using this term of urolithiasis or nephrolithiasis, we need to understand what is the place where they are lodged in. So let us start with urolithiasis. It is actually originating anywhere in the urinary system, including the kidney and the bladder. So the term urolithiasis stands out to be a common term. So it can be it is a diagnostic term. If you are not sure where it is lodged or you are not sure about its location, in general you can use this term as urolithiasis. So this will refer to a calculi lodged anywhere in the urinary tract. Either it can be kidney or ureter or bladder. So it's a general term. Now comes the nephrolithiasis term. It refers to the presence of such calculi in the kidney. So if the location of renal calculi is in the kidney, then the term nephrolithiasis is used. Calicele is a calculi, refers to aggregation either in the minor or the major calyx. So it was the name, it was with suggestive, that is the calyx. Calicele is the calculi which is actually seen in the major or the minor calyx, which is a part of kidney, but which pass urine into the ureter. So it is the collection of the collecting duct. The collecting ducts open into the minor and major calyx is ultimately. So in any condition, if the examination, that is the imaging technique, suggests you guided sonography or X-ray suggests you that the location of the calculi is somewhere in the minor or the major, then the term calicele might be used. Then comes uretrocalculi, urethrolithiasis or uretrocalculi. Uretrolithiasis is a term used when the calculi is actually located in the ureter. So the most frequently found type of calculi is uretrolithiasis or the uretro, where there is the location of the calculi is somewhere in the ureter. Then comes the cystolithiasis, where the location is in the bladder, that is the urinary bladder, not your gallbladder. That is something, gallbladder is cholelithiasis, which is completely different. But this is cystolithiasis. Cystolithiasis, the word cysto here refers to the urinary bladder and lithiasis refers to the calculi. So we have this 5 location, either it is in kidney, that is nephrolithiasis, be anywhere the common is, here is urolithiasis. Calicele is term used when they present in the calyx, and if it's present in the ureter, it's uretrolithiasis. Now, based on the chemical composition, we have following classification, that is calcium containing stone, struvate stone, uric acid stone. Now let us consider first about the chemical composition. There is calcium containing substances. Calcium containing stone represent around 80% of the cases. These typically contain calcium oxalate either alone or in combination with calcium phosphate. So calcium containing itself can be divided in 2 parts. That is, either it is calcium oxalate or in combination with calcium phosphate. The formation of calcium phosphate stone is associated with conditions such as hyperparathyroidism and renal tubular acidosis. If you remember, we have discussed about renal tubular acidosis. So these 2 conditions of hyperparathyroidism and renal tubular acidosis will contribute into the formation of calcium phosphate calculi. So what I said here is calcium containing we have 2 varieties here. Either it is exclusive calcium oxalate or it is either exclusive calcium phosphate and calcium oxalate. But the point to be noted here is, as hyperparathyroidism or parathyroid hormone is actually associated with metabolism of your calcium, so any disorder of parathyroid gland will lead into formation of these stones. Then comes the struvite stone. It is 10 to 15% of the urinary calculi. It's composed of ammonium magnesium phosphate. That is struvite stone. It is also known as an infection stone, or the other term is known as staghorn stone, urease or triple phosphate stone. So we have many names given to this particular stone. Its actual chemical composition is ammonium magnesium. It might also infection stone, staghorn stone, urease or triple phosphate stone, and it forms most often in the presence of infection by urease bacteria. It's interesting to know that it's an result of an infection or a UTI particularly of a bacteria which is urea splitting bacteria. So what happens is, see, ammonium is a part of the stone, so somewhere nitrogen metabolism. The second point in this is the presence or the names of this. The stone, as I said, the infection development. It's also known as staghorn because of the horny, as you see here. They are not round features. Either they have spikes coming out of, and also urease or phosphate stone is the other name given to the struvite stone. The enzyme, what happens here is the enzyme urease. These organisms metabolize urea into ammonia and carbon dioxide. This alkalizes the urine, which is basically acidic, resulting in favorable condition for the formation of struvite stone. Also, condition Proteus vulgaris, Klebsiella, Enterobacter, urea plasma, urea lactinum are the most common organism involved in the above mechanism. So this was the mechanism where the organism was breaking urea into ammonia and carbon dioxide. This actually converts the urine into an alkaline medium, and this alkaline medium will promote the formation. Now these infection stones are commonly observed in people who have factor which predisposes them to urinary tract infection. So as I said, this is an infection stone. It is a post-infection stone. So obviously recurrent UTI would be in the past history of the patient, or the patient would say that I do have a recurrent UTI. So if the patient says they have the recurrent UTI, it can be a probable diagnosis that this person is suffering from such type of calculi, such as those with spinal cord injury and other form of neurogenic bladder, iliac conduct urinary diversion, and vesico-urethral reflex and obstructive uropathies might lead to recurrent UTI. And in other cases also, where the person due to some other reasons is having urinary tract infection and recurrent urinary tract infection, then this stone might be considered. Now the third category here is the uric acid stone. So this is together a different combination, and we can see that 5 to 10% of all stones are formed in uric acid. Uric acid may form in association with condition that causes hyperuricuria, an excessive amount of uric acid in the urine, with or without high hyperuricemia, that is high amount of uric. So see, the importance or the clinical importance of uric acid stone. Suppose somehow you have an already diagnosed case that the person is suffering from uric acid calculi, or the type of calculi present is its composition is uric acid. So in order to confirm that where is this uric acid coming from, if you order a test for serum uric acid level or the blood uric acid level, you might not find that the uric acid level in the blood is quite high. So although gout might be a condition which will contribute into the formation of uric acid calculi, but it's not necessary that you might be finding elevated level of uric acid in blood, but yes, there would be an elevated level of uric acid in urine. So remember, the test that you will order for to confirm this is presence of uric acid in urine. People affected with xanthinuria often produce stone composed of xanthin. People with certain rare inborn errors of metabolism have propensity to accumulate crystal forming substance in their urine. For example, those with cystinuria form stone composed of cystine. So these are two different combinations that might also be available to us. That was all about the classification of renal calculi. We'll continue renal calculi in the second part. Thank you for listening.